It seems like every week new explorations into the jungle by scientists are finding brand new reptile species. But unfortunately, every week seems like we're losing reptile species too. So what if we could bring them back? These are the top 5 extinct reptiles that maybe we can bring back into existence. My name's Adam, this is Diamond, you're watching Wickens Wicked Reptiles, stick around. Before we begin, I know de-extinction is one of those things where a lot of people don't like it or it's a controversial matter. So let me know in the comment section below what you think as a whole about de-extinction, but I want to talk about the reptiles. Obviously, this is a reptile channel, and of course, we're going to be talking about reptiles that are functionally extinct or extinct but not declared extinct as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that because I want to make this video not clickbait. I want to make it about animals that could actually be brought back rather than talking about animals that died out a million years ago that for sure we're not bringing back. So let's start out with number 5. The Jamaican gallywasp. So this is a really cool species. We've found species like this when I was traveling in Costa Rica that are of the same family, Diploglossa. So this is a species where there's lots and lots of similar animals still around, but this specific species, which was the biggest of its genus ever to exist, unfortunately is extinct. And the reason is, in Jamaica in the 1800s, a lot of predators were introduced that were not native there, such as mongoose. So the mongoose is an animal that is going to eat things, mainly snakes, lizards, amphibians, things like that. And unfortunately, because the gallywasp was so big, I'm talking 30 centimeters, so a full foot from snout to vent, and then the tail another foot. So a 2-foot animal, this is a big gallywasp. Because it's so big, mongoose saw them as an easy target and basically wiped them out. This animal was actually very common. People would find them in their gardens in Jamaica all the time. And this was until about the mid 1800s or early 1800s. And the last confirmed sighting of the Jamaican gallywasp, well, that was in 1840. So a long, long time ago. And of course, there are locals who have said they've seen them before. Is it possible that they do exist, but in such small numbers, scientists have never seen one's never been produced to fully examine and say, hey, this is the right species? Or perhaps they're confusing them with different species that look similar. Now, this species does have living relatives, so it is possible we could hybridize this animal with similar species that we have DNA from that are in museums and things like that. But the problem with all these animals is there motivation to bring them back, to de-extinct them? Not is it possible, because with a lot of them it is it going to happen because is there enough research or funding going on to do it? And the answer with this one is iffy. It's one of those things where we have the DNA, we could do it, likely, probably. However, there really doesn't seem to be much initiative. So is it going to happen anytime soon? No. Will it ever happen? I would say because it has lots of range for it to go back to, and we could proliferate the species in captivity and then reintroduce it, I'd give this a 3 out of 5. So not unlikely, but not very likely, and probably not going to be anytime soon. Now, the idea that these species don't exist and might never again totally stinks. But you know what doesn't? My car. Thanks to today's sponsor, Drift. Drift creates air care products for your car and for your home. And all the materials they use are sustainable, and their scents are made with natural, essential, and fragrance oils. And their car products are $9 to $15, so they're super affordable. What's cool about car air fresheners is you can get them in a subscription. First, you receive a starter kit with a clip and a scent, and then you can just get a monthly refill, as they recommend changing every 30 days. The best part is the scent of the month, which features a new limited edition scent, and they're inspired by the season. The problem with scenting any environment is nose blindness is a real thing. You get used to the same scent and it doesn't smell special anymore. So Drift gives you the option to change every 30 days, and this gives you some variety. Your nose knows the difference and the experience doesn't become stale. It also helps Drift stick to its sustainability message and produce almost made-to-order products. The subscription is very flexible. You can change your scent choice, your delivery frequency, or cancel your subscription at any time. This month I got teak, and it smells like summer. It's not too powerful, but you definitely know it's there, which is what you want in any fragrance. So make sure you use my coupon code Reptiles for 55% off Drift. That makes it less than $5 for your first month. So hit the link below or use the QR code and use my code for 55% off at Drift. Number 4, the oldest on the list, Megalonia. Now in the Pleistocene in Australia, there was a bunch of mega predators. The megafauna there was crazy. There were so many animals, including a marsupial lion, that you can't even fathom to exist today, but they did. Australia was a very scary place about, I don't know, 50,000 years ago, something like that, which is when the youngest of the skeletal remains of Megalonia were found. So 50,000 years is the youngest, right? They were existent long before that. So it is possible that early indigenous settlers were around at the same time as Megalonia. It is possible that because Megalonia, the structure of them, which is very similar to other varanids, because they are part of the Varanus family, finally, they were reclassified, it is possible that they were too slow to escape indigenous people who would chase them. They would have been seen likely as predators, first of all, because of this animal, 11.5 to 23 feet. Let me put this into perspective for you. The longest snake on Earth, the reticulated python, 23 foot is a big reticulated python. That's the longest snake on Earth. And there isn't even a remotely sizable lizard like that anymore. The Komodo dragon being the biggest, and they're, 10 foot, maybe a little bit bigger. So not even close, right? They're dwarfed by Megalonia. So would Megalonia be able to outrun indigenous people? And even if it could, would there be ways that these people could eat them for food, first of all, or chase them away? Because like we were saying before, predation. A small child would be nothing for Megalonia just to scoff down, basically. Now, did this actually happen? We're just hypothesizing. We don't actually know. There's no record of this. I mean, 50,000 years ago, right? But they died off at the same time as a lot of other megafauna die off, but the megafauna was being outcompeted by the early indigenous settlers. So will this one be brought back? For a number of reasons, this is the lowest on the list. I'm gonna give this one a 1 out of 5. First of all, would we have any need or want to bring it back? Probably not. And even if we would want to, could we? Do we have the right DNA? Not really. So this one for sure is the least likely on the list, but let's get to something that could probably, definitely, perhaps, possibly come back. Number 3, Chapman's pygmy chameleon. Now there are a few pygmy chameleons, micro chameleons, that we've talked about on the channel before. Most of them are found in Madagascar, but there are some micro chameleons that are found on mainland of Africa. The mainland of Africa, which is just the giant continent. The continental Africa is what I'm trying to say. There is a country called Malawi, and in Malawi, there used to be an extensive range of this species of micro chameleon, which is not really related to the micro chameleons that we found in Madagascar. What makes this species unique, although I'm showing you a bunch of chameleon species that are not terrestrial, these were. So these are a terrestrial species that gets to about 2.5 inches. So this is a really tiny chameleon. What's really interesting about them is they had an extensive range in Malawi. However, deforestation is rampant in Malawi, and there's really nothing stopping it. Here we have this organization, that organization, lobbyists, the whole thing to protect our forests. In many parts of Africa, that's not a thing. I saw the deforestation firsthand in Madagascar. I can't even put into words what it looked like. That entire island, there will be nothing left in 20 years. Malawi is very similar. It's just rampant. There's very little to protect any of the species or any of the actual wooded area. And because of that, there are really 2 pockets that we know of that would be suitable habitat, not even saying that the species is there. And of these, they're about 0.11 miles squared. So less than a quarter mile in the entire world that would be suitable habitat for this species. Now keep in mind, there was a study done, a survey done in 1998, where they found individuals of the species. However, where they found them has been deforested. So there's really nowhere that they've ever been actually found that still exists. And the problem is when the deforestation started to happen, they would take a pocket here, pocket here, pocket here, and then would leave little pockets where the animals couldn't go in between. So you'd have to hope there's a breeding population in this part that's in this wooded area, and then this part, and then this part, and then so basically what I'm trying to say is the chances of them being alive are next to 0. They're not technically declared extinct, but we haven't found one since 1998. And the only places we found them in 1998 no longer exist. And the places that exist now, we didn't find them in 1998. So are they here? Probably not. However, we have lots of samples, and we could likely, if not clone, create some sort of hybrid or do some sort of gene editing to make this species viable again. The problem is, where would we put them? I mean, we could do it for captivity. I mean, it'd be cool to have in the pet trade, but where would you put them in the wild? The entirety of their natural range is now deforested. And just to put in perspective how small the area is, 0.11 miles squared. Imagine a third of a mile in this direction and a third of a mile in this direction, and the area in between, that's 0.11 square miles. It's next to nothing. I know people with fields or yards bigger than this. And because there's no suitable range, I would give this a 2 out of 5 likelihood that we'll ever bring them back. Number 2, the Yunnan box turtle. This is the most fascinating story on the list because although the species now technically isn't extinct, they were considered to be technically extinct very recently. Here's how it goes. In 1908, 10 of the individuals in the area, so it's the Yunnan Peninsula of China, were collected, and that's all we know about the species. There was 10 individuals we collected in 1908, never found another one, according to science. Any scientist did anyway, or never studied by science. That's what we know. And then in 1940, the last of these specimens was ever collected alive. So we thought they were extinct. That makes sense. 1940, we're going on 80 plus years that they haven't been around as of today. But of course, there's been people that said, oh, I found one, but they look so similar to other Chinese box turtles. 5 to 6 inches, they are omnivorous, you're gonna find them on land, but they are really good swimmers. They're kind of similar to most other species. But then in 2004, there was a market in Yunnan province. There was a man there who was trying to sell these box turtles, which is very common, by the way. If you go to these Asian markets, I've been to them in Thailand before, you find reptile shops that are selling things that they might not even know what they are. Things that were clearly poached. I've seen tree monitors for $100 that are $6,000 here. I've seen Borneo earless monitors for $100 that are completely illegal to be there, and the shop owner didn't even know what it was. So this isn't really uncommon. But when somebody said, hey, that's a Yunnan box turtle, I know what that is. This is 2004, keep in mind. Of course, science, the science community said, no, there's no way. Maybe it's a hybrid, because in China, in most of Asia, it's really common to hybridize animals to garner more money. There are things that we would never do here, like hybridized dart frogs. You see all the time in China, for example, and this happens with box turtles and other species. So they decided, let's genetically test this animal, and 2 other specimens were found in markets as well, just like this. So they tested all 3, and then in 2007 they said, you know what, that's those are actually Yunnan box turtles. Those are the real deal. So an animal that was thought to be extinct since 1940 is now popping up in these markets in China, in the actual province where these animals would be native from in the first place. So scientists went out looking, and guess what? They found a very small population, and it was only because of these animals that they found in these markets in the first place that they started to look again seriously. Nobody knows where this section is. It's very secret. And the question then is, are they functionally extinct? Is it possible that they could still reproduce? Well, clearly, if there are still babies or young individuals, and the last one we found was in 1940, the answer is yes. But are they on the brink of extinction? This is the same sort of idea as the crested gecko. In 1994, a crested gecko fell into a research facility, and the researchers were like, what the heck is this? This was supposed to be extinct, and now they're everywhere. Could we do that with a Yunnan box turtle? With this one, I'm gonna give a 5 out of 5 that we could bring it back. And I think that in terms of the timeline, this would be probably the soonest that would be brought back in comparison to the rest of the list. And number 1, the Florida Island giant Galapagos tortoise. Now, the Galapagos tortoise, I've talked about many times before. This is a group of species. 14, 13 species, I forget exactly how many, but only 12 of them still exist, that are still extant, they're not extinct. So this species is dependent on the island, because Galapagos is an archipelago, it's not one main island. Obviously, we know, thanks to Charles Darwin, that the Galapagos Island, because of the distinct places of the island and distinct finches, for example. This is where the theory of evolution came from, by the way, this exact place. And this is kind of playing out with these tortoises, because these tortoises, although the same species, they were segregated into races. That's what they called them. Really, it's subspecies, we'd call them now. And a lot of time in the early part of science where we'd bring animals into zoos into the West, they would just be thrown together. They wouldn't really be, you know, this is from this island and this is from this island. This is the early part of scientific discovery of different species and zoology. So a lot of the time you'd have a bunch of these tortoises together, and then what they found was each of the races would want to breed with each other if given the opportunity. So if you have one from Island A and one from Island B, but then you have another one from Island B, the Island B pair would pick each other over Island A. The most obvious example, and the one that we all know, is Lonesome George. Lonesome George was the last living specimen of his species and recently died out. Lonesome George was a Pinta Island giant Galapagos tortoise. They are now functionally extinct. Well, not functionally, they're completely extinct. There are no purebred or pure-blooded Pinta Island tortoises anymore. Lonesome George was the last one, and they tried to get him to breed with several females of different islands, and it never happened. However, the Florena Island giant tortoise, this tortoise, they're still finding hybrids. What's really interesting is the only pure-blooded one they've ever found, or pure-blooded ones they've ever found, were from subfossils. So this animal, they've never even found a living specimen ever before. However, there are hybrids on different islands. And recently we've been finding hybrids that look like they're 50-50 that are only 15 years old. So is it possible that this species still exists pure-blooded, just on a different island? And the way that happened was early on, explorers would take these tortoises for food, basically, put them in their ships, and as they went from island to island, sometimes they would drop them off, so deliberately. Sometimes they would throw them overboard to lighten the load if they didn't need that much food. So is it possible that the Florena Island species is living on a different island in its pure form? It is possible, and even if it's not, we have the right technology to make a hybrid and make it as close as possible to the Florena Island tortoise. This is really exciting. So in terms of likelihood, I would give this one a 4 out of 5. Let me know in the comment section below, do you agree with any of these? What's the most interesting extinct reptile species to you? A special thanks to Drift for sponsoring today's episode. Check out the link below. Also, if you want to join the Patreon, discount on new merch, one-on-ones, I love doing those, videos early, extra content, all that for as little as $1 a month. And that's it, because I do videos twice a week. That means I'll see you in the next one.